We've talked about doubt being very common, that if you're human at some point, if you're honest, you're experiencing some type of doubt because of our finiteness. C.S. Lewis had a well-known encounter with doubt. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it was called life. I mean, he had it for a long time. It wasn't a one-time event. You know, if I went down the list of the very well-known apologists today, the ones that I know real well, virtually every one of them had a significant bout with doubt, maybe more than one. Lewis, you can tell when you read Lewis, you can tell that Lewis is a veteran doubter. When he says things like, in Mere Christianity, he says, I'm convinced that when I'm going in for surgery, I'm convinced the doctor could do a good job. But he says, when they clamp that mask over my face to give me the ether, I think the quote is, a mere childish panic grips me. He said, it's not that I don't have faith in the doctor. If I didn't have faith in the doctor, I wouldn't be doing this. I say, what if, there you go, what if they start cutting me before I'm not properly out? And he said, well, what's going on? Do I not have faith in science? Oh, contraire. A lot of faith in science. But I also know that things go wrong sometimes. And he goes on, next page as I recall, he says, if you don't know how to tell your emotions where to get off, first of all, he says, you have about as much chance of maintaining your faith as a snowflake does in the mouth of a blast furnace. But then this line, he says, if you don't know how to tell your emotions where to get off, you can't be a good Christian. Now somebody might say, that's the problem. Christianity doesn't work because of the answer to the questions. Well, get the rest of the sentence. Lewis says, if you don't know how to tell your emotions how to get off, you can't be a good Christian. You can't even be a good atheist. All you'll be is a creature dithering to and fro dependent on the latest state of your digestion, which is sort of like, which way is the wind blowing? And so he says, he has two chapters in Mere Christianity, faith and faith. And it's first learn how to exercise faith, and then we have to practice it till it becomes a habit. And that's part of what we've been calling the ABCs. That's part of the cognitive trip. I published an essay one time in a book on C.S. Lewis that I argued that C.S. Lewis was on to the cognitive remedy, which is the major remedy today. Lewis was on to the cognitive remedy before the earliest major cognitive psychologists were. He found the remedy just by going through it and trying to conquer it himself. So he learned what to tell himself. And he gives several responses. Go to church and worship when you can. Worship's good. Keep a minimum amount of important doctrine before your eyes. Keep it in there. He says, don't think it's going to stay there. It's not going to stay there unless you practice, unless you build it up with scripture. He says, because you're going to have these things and they're going to be with you. And if you're that personality type, there's a good chance that you'll keep having these things. Lewis is a veteran doubter. I would suggest, besides Mere Christianity, a couple of great places for this. One is in the book, The World's Last Night, where he asks the question, can we be committed to Christianity even if Christians have let us down, people have let us down in general, we think God's let us down? Should we bite the bullet and say, no, that's not true, God doesn't let us down, and stay in the faith? Then in the book Christian Reflections, he's got a great chapter on whether religion is reality or substitute. And he argues it's reality. That's probably his best chapter on the subject in Christian Reflections. And he goes after what do you say to yourself and overcome the what if and the painful causing doubts that are the root of your, because they go after the core of your being, because they're the most important thing in your life.
So You mentioned reality.
Yeah.
To have our thoughts line up with reality is, kind of what you're talking about. That of truth and reality. When we have thought distortions and our thoughts do not line up with reality, that tends to lead to bad places.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you go, how do we know what reality is? Now we're back to an earlier question. You're doing science. You're doing some things about what the world is and how we get there. And science is about induction, and induction, using many arguments to get to one conclusion, is what we're doing when we answer our factual questions and zero in on our emotional doubts.